Good evening, everyone. I'm Joe Abadi. Thank you for joining me on a special edition of Vintage Motocross Q&A. I've got a special guest tonight, and that's why we put this show together on a Thursday night. He's been racing since 1981. He raced professionally for a while. I've got a whole lot of questions for him. We'll be right back with my guest tonight, Jerry Mattox. You're watching Vintage Motocross Q&A. In just a minute, my guest will enter the studio right now. I have to thank our sponsors, Racer X Magazine, the International Motocross Museum, Motion Pro, ReplicaMotorcycleParts.com, Sirius Studios, Vintco, Preston Petty Products, and Full Circle Racing, as well as Amsoil. Let's not forget the people that really help make this show grow. Here they are, a list of our show sponsors. If you'd like to become a show sponsor, please get a hold of me. It's just $49.95. You will get a t-shirt and some other goodies from some of our sponsors. You'll also get your name on the board behind me. We let that run usually about 6 months, and we just greatly appreciate your help with all of that, okay? As I mentioned just a moment ago, my guest tonight is Jerry Mattox. He is a gentleman who, well, I think he rediscovered motocross, or motocross maybe rediscovered him. He's been racing a lot the past, I think 3 or 4 years at least. He's got a great little bike he calls Clunker. It's anything but a clunker. He's got himself some sponsors. He has really taken it to the next level as a privateer in vintage, because he's really taken all the experience he has had over all those years of racing and really put a program together, including sponsors, and has found his way across the country with a motorhome, with his family. It's just a real feel-good story. I would like to welcome my guest tonight, Mr. Jerry Mattox. Jerry, thank you for joining me.
Hey, Joe. Thank you for having me. What a great night to talk vintage motocross.
It is. It certainly is. And I hope the description I gave you coming in about you rediscovering motocross or vintage motocross, I hope that was a good segue for what we're about to talk about. So let's start off with this, Jerry. How about some entry points of where you got into motocross? And for all of us, really, it's probably been the last 40, 45 years altogether, maybe
That's
50.
fair.
Maybe 50.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Your opening statement said I started in 81. That's when I actually turned pro in 81. I started in 1974. And by 1975, I had my first CR 125 Elsinore. Mm-hmm. So it's fair to say I have a deep lineage with the Honda products, in particular the old CR 125s. I've never stopped racing, Joe, ever. I've been racing all my life. And, so the short story goes, I basically started in 1975, goofed around the Southeast, trying to be somebody and learning how to ride. And by 1981, I had earned enough Pro-Am points to get a pro license. And then I was that guy, like 98.5% of every pro motocrosser out there trying to make a main event or maybe even just get in the show kind of guy. I've raced Supercross, I've raced outdoor nationals, been around the block a whole bunch, had a great time doing it. Unfortunately for me, I never become one of the greats, but hey, I was there. I get to be that guy that says, at least I shared the track with a lot of great guys. And I feel like I came through the pro ranks in the best time motocross ever was. In my opinion, the 80s were awesome, And
I get it, Jerry. And you know what? There are a lot of us out there, well, not me, but there are a lot of guys who, barely turned expert, you know what I mean? And to go to that next level, and you know what that's like when you get to a pro level. Those guys don't fool around. They're out there racing for money. Or as I used to like to say, they race because they're racing for food. Yeah, and that's a different level of competition.
Oh, absolutely. And I also learned there's a big jump from college ball to pro ball. Okay. That's a big gap. And that gap is still huge to this very day, Right. But I never stopped racing. I after 1987, I took a little time off and I started racing stand-up jet skis. And so I traveled that circuit and ended up as a veteran rider. I ended up finishing second in the world at Lake Havasu on a stand-up Yamaha Super Jet. And when I got bored with that, I went right back to motorcycles again, and I've never left. And so I did 9 years on the hare scramble circuit, GNCCs, local cross-country races, things like that. And then we had our son, my wife and I, who, by the way, just so people need to know, Tammy Mattox is a multi-time arena cross and off-road motocross champion. So
your wife is?
My wife. Yes, absolutely. She has a trophy room of her own. She scored an arena cross championship and a hare scramble championship. She wasn't real big into.
I had no idea, Jerry. I knew that she was quite an accomplished actress, and she's had some great roles. In fact, in a little while, we're going to be showing a clip from a movie that you were recently in, you and your motorcycle, with Tammy. We'll get to that. We'll get to that in a little bit. Right now, you know what? Here's what I want to do while I'm thinking about it, because it just caught my eye. Why don't you tell me about some of those sponsors that you have behind you there? Then we'll talk a little bit about maybe how you got them and how you got them on board. So take it from wherever, AMSOIL or our Remix, whichever one you want to talk about. Let's talk a little bit about them and how they helped you out along the way.
Well, it's been an amazing journey, and it kind of has to go back to how we very first got started. And I'll try and be brief, but it's almost hard to be. How I made it to vintage motocross in the first place was in 2021. I was racing in the veteran modern classes on a KTM 250SX, and the day came when Ryder, who was riding 125A on KTMs, we pulled off the track and we were having a father-son talk about what do we want to do next. And it was kind of that time when he had to make a decision. Do we try and pursue this sport further, or do we go to college, blah, 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 and we can talk about that later. But one of the promoters calls me up one day, Joe, and he says, hey, we just got commissioned to hold an AHRMA National at our track. This particular track happens to be Muddy Creek in Tennessee. The promoter happens to be named Sam Gammon. And he calls me up one day, and because I've been running his series with a very personal friend of mine named Eddie Branch, and we were ranked number 1 and 2, Eddie first, me second, as usual, and in the 50-plus class, 55-plus, something like that. And he called on us. He says, hey, you two guys have been around me since the 70s. I need you two to go out and get vintage bikes and be at this race to support me.
Huh, okay.
And Eddie thought it was a good idea. I wasn't so keen on it, but long story short is I went and found an old Elsinore and a bunch of pieces and parts and boxes and junk, and went to work putting it together. And for a week or 2 or 3 or 4, I struggled with it. And I'm going back into my memory of 1975, how to make this dumb thing run. And I had forgotten that the Keehan carburetors on those things, when they get tired, they're kind of hard to rebuild and they're fussy. And probably the best thing you can do is take it off and put a Mikuni on it.
Right.
So one day I make a post on Facebook and I'm saying, hey, I'm jumping this big old 70-foot tabletop at this local track and on an Elsinore. Instantly, a response comes back from some weirdo named Butch saying, a what? Yeah. Jump that bit on a what? I said, a little CR 125. And so the story goes, a week or so later, he meets me at this track to try and witness this. And I'm out there on it. And so the funny part is he didn't know if I'd be there or not, but he showed up, and sure enough, just like clockwork, I pulled in. That's where I met Butch, and we went to work on the bike.
And if anybody's looking, when he talks about Butch, he's talking about it's right up there, Butch. There it is. See if that Butch was able to help you out building some engines. And by the way it looks, Jerry, with the results you've had over this past season and other seasons too, I mean, a Butch Sandgraf engine, it seems to be the way to go.
Well, and to parlay off to that, he was on and said, Jerry, we got to throw that Keehan off, put a Mikuni on it. We took the carburetor off, put the Mikuni on. Next thing you know, the bike's running better. And we went through some intake manifold issues where the aftermarket companies weren't making quality intake manifolds. So we manufactured our own intake manifold, stopped all the air leaks. the old basic, keep the oil on the inside and the dirt on the outside of the engine. And here's the funny part. While this is all happening, on this very same day, Russell Waters is standing over on the corner with his CR250 watching all this. And Butch, I don't know, Butch had whispered in his ear, like, this guy might do pretty good. If we help him, he might do pretty good. So on that very day, I secured AMSOIL and Butch's on the same day, and we hadn't even raced a race yet. We hadn't even gone out, and we had barely turned a few laps on the practice track, and I'd already secured my first 2 majors.
This is a good time to thank. This is a good time to thank Russell Waters and AMSOIL for not only helping out Vintage Motocross Q&A, but of course for helping out Jerry Mattox in his endeavors too. If anybody out there wants to purchase some oil from Russell directly, go to www.theoilpeople.shopamsoil.com. Thank you, Russell Waters and AMSOIL, for helping out both Jerry and myself. Who else we got there in the background? We got Butch. We got AMSOIL. Tell me about. You know what? You know what I want to hear about? Gordon McCaffrey. McCaffrey Welding, longtime friend of mine. Met him the first day I raced vintage back in 1999. What'd Gordon do for you?
I came to know Gordy through one of his customers and one of our supporters named Ann Walker. She has a super nice CR125. It's a showpiece. I'm not allowed to ride it because I'd scratch it all up. It's just too pretty for me to be on. And but I loved her stand. And I said, I want one of those stands. So she called Gordon. Gordy sent me down 2 or 3 stands now. So all my bikes are sitting on top of Gordy McCaffrey stands. And even more so, anytime I'm in New York or in the Northeast, Gordy comes to watch me race. We go to dinner. We do nice things. Joey's been first class to me, first class. And those stands they're rock solid. And without them, anybody that has a vintage bike with a low pipe, you have to have one of these kind of stands. Yeah, Gordy's your go-to guy for that.
In fact, it was shortly after I met Gordon, I bought a stand from him back when he wasn't really making stands full time. I still have it till this day, so the quality is definitely there. And I mean, the guy's a certified welder, so he certainly knows what he's doing, and he's an enthusiast, so he knows exactly how to make a stand and make it work as well. Jerry, you told me you never really stopped riding motocross, but once again, you've had what, 5 national championships over the past 3 years. When did you get into the vintage side of it? 05, 08, 03? When did that happen?
2022.
Oh, you just got started.
I'm a novice. I'm a newbie. I'm nobody. In 2022, it was when that race promoter called me and said, I need you guys to show up at this Muddy Creek National. And we built these bikes just a few years ago. And so Clunker's existence, he turned 3 today, we'll say. And so I have other friends that are in the motocross industry. I think of one of my dear friends named Michael Edwards, who tried to get me into vintage 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. I said, there's no way I'm riding one of those old pieces of junks. I'm a real motocrosser. I ride real bikes. I'm somebody. I don't mess around with junk,
Right.
That pretentiousness and that narcissism, I love to make fun of the same guys that say that to me when I present the same issue to them. Right? I've
had friends that go through that too. Back in my first year in vintage was 1999. So by 2002, 2003, I was well into it and had quite a few bikes by then. But I also had some friends that we used to race modern bikes with, and they were like 10 years younger than me. And they said the same thing. We're not riding that old crap. But I put one of them on a Can-Am 250, okay, and his neck hurt when he got off that bike. That bike was tuned perfectly. Next thing you know, he had to have a Can-Am. Another guy had to have a Honda, and they're racing 2 times a day on a Saturday, not 4 laps on a Sunday, and getting up at 5:30 in the morning and not getting home till 8:30 at night. So that type of getting back all that racing for what you put in, it is just an absolutely incredible time, and you get a lot more out of it than you do on a modern bike, and it's also a lot safer, if you could call racing a motorcycle safe. Here's you and Clunker right here, Jerry.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, this particular race is only my 2nd vintage race on Clunker ever. This is in a track you might know of called Pavilion, New York.
Oh yeah, in
And
Pennsylvania.
it was this particular track is in New York.
New York.
Pavilion. New York, yes, sir.
Okay.
And east of Niagara Falls is the best I can tell you, headed out towards Rochester. But anyway, wonderful track, great people. And this is the day that I learned, everybody, that did you know that New York is not New York City? Did you know that there's an entire state wrapped around the city? And if you go into New York City and you're down in Manhattan, like I spent a lot of time in, that New Yorkers are just good country people. I've never met a nicer bunch of people than my outskirts New Yorkers. The second you leave the city, it's a different planet altogether. And some of the best motocross racing you'll ever do.
Yeah, I would say, 90 minutes away from Manhattan, it's a different world. Even an hour and a half, 90 minutes pretty much puts you in a whole different atmosphere than what people expect when it comes to New York City. I want to thank my new sponsor, Sirius Studios. They're coming out with some great race gear as well as some wonderful casual gear for the off-track scene, all moto related, and they're coming out with more and more stuff all the time. Be sure to visit them online at SiriusStudio.com. If you are just getting here, my guest tonight is Jerry Mattox. We're talking about a variety of different things, including the bikes he rode when he got started racing. We're going to be getting into what his son does now. Is also, I just love a father and son story. So, you know what? There's no need to put it off any further, Jerry. Tell me about you and Ryder and how you guys decided that you guys were going to hit the vintage trail together.
Well, it turns out that on that day in 2021, Ryder had just finished up. Just so you know, Ryder is not new to racing motorcycles. Ryder has been racing for 17 years. His AMA license is almost ready to turn into one of those lifetime memberships. Wow. And he's only 20 years old now. So he's only 5 years away from being a lifetime member, and he's 20. That's pretty scary, right?
That is something, yeah.
Yeah, but I've been Ryder's trainer since he was 4, and he started racing AMA motocross at that point. And he's had the luxury to go to Loretta's many times, but 4 times at least, and many Olympics and all the regionals and area qualifiers and all the great races that you can do as an amateur motocrosser. Ryder has done them all. And, so very experienced on the motorcycle. And again, we were trying to make that decision as to just how far do we really want to pursue this. And of course, he come of age where I wanted him to go to college and study and get a real job, as they might say. And while doing so, I took off and got pulled off sides into this vintage motocross world. And He's watching me win this national championship in 2022. And, now he's critiquing me and telling me, you could do better. You could do this. You could hold the gas on here. You should be standing up here, put your feet on the pegs, turn your toes in, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, all right, big boy, if you're such a big dude, I'm going to build you an Elsinore and I'm going to bring you out and we'll see how you do. Joe, when I tell you, the first day I put him on his Elsinore, he couldn't even let the clutch out and go from me to you. It was hilarious. He threw the bike down to his dad. I don't see how you can ride. I don't see how you can ride such a piece of junk. There's no way. It's garbage. I'm never doing this. Don't call me doing it. All right. So 2 or 3 weeks go by. He's getting better. Took him down to Florida. We went down to Gatorback and trained for a few days. And then we went to Waldo, Florida, round 1 of the 2023 series, AHRMA National Championships, round 1. We went down and in practice, we're going around the track and he's following. He says, Dad, I can go your speed. I can match you, but I can't go 1 second faster. Not even a little bit. I said, okay, well, it'll be a good race today. Joe, when I tell you, when they dropped the gate, the boy run off and left me and everybody else on the track. And I'm like, what happened to all that crap about you saying you could only go? He says, I don't know. It just kind of kicked in again. The adrenaline came on and stuff. And he has been slaughtering it ever since. But in 2023, Ryder and I raced all over the country. And when the end of the season came and they're tallying up the points, we were in a deadlock tie for total points. So what happens is when you go into a tie, the rule book says, okay, we'll go to number of first places. And
Yes.
AHRMA does their scoring per moto. And so they count up the first places, we're still tied. So they say, okay, we'll go to second places. They count up our second places, we're still tied. Okay. And so the race promoter, what AHRMA calls off-road official, came up to me and goes, Jerry, there's a rule. There's a tie-breaking rule that cannot be penetrated. And he says, oldest guy wins in the event of a tie. Oldest guy wins. And I said, no, we don't. I said, if you take my national championship or if you take Ryder's national championship away from him, because I'm older, or if you give me a win because I'm older, I'm still just arrogant enough that I'm not going to win a race based on age. Okay. If I wanted to win a race based on age, I'd race age classes. I raced the 125 expert class where I tell people I got a 16-year-old on my left and a 60-year-old on my right, and they both haul ass. Okay. So it's like, the race runner says, we think this is really a tie. And we're going to score it that way. And we're going to, for the first time in the history of motocross that we can find, a father and son tied at the expert level of motorcycle racing. It's never been done before. So that was our big claim to fame in 2023. They had to award 2 number 1 plates in the 125 expert class, one to me and one to my son. And to end that, I took that bit of information to my AMA rep. I'm very tight with the AMA, just so you know. And I took it to him and told him, I said, has this ever been done before? He goes, no. He says, we want to document this and write this up. Despite it being an AHRMA race, the AMA was very open-minded to saying this needs to be in the book somewhere. So they ended up doing an article and saying nice things about it and got a letter from them. And AHRMA acknowledged it. The AMA acknowledged it. But to be the first father-son team, out in motocross, you've always got brothers, cousins, people racing at the same time. I mean, particularly in the amateur world, but they're rarely in the same class. And, hey,
you know what, Jerry? I want to ask you this too.
Yes, sir.
I want to ask you this. You and Ryder were in the same class. That was what? Historic 125?
That's called Sportsman 125 Expert, and that is for 1975 and earlier 125cc machines.
Okay.
And that has become the premier class for us.
Okay. Now, this is where people who are watching the show who understand AHRMA rules and the difference in motorcycles are going to really sit up and take notice. If you haven't sat up and taken notice yet, Jerry, you've won a national title in the 125 historic class, but you did it on a 74. So hear me out, people that are watching the show. He took a bike that was vintage legal, 1974, 7 inches of travel in the front, 4 inches of travel in the back. Moved up to a class where you have 77, 78 bikes, 76, 77, 78. You could be on a Mako with moved up shocks. You could be on a mono shock. You could be on an A4 Kawasaki. Bikes that are suspension wise and power wise, although there are modifications, far superior than a 74 CR 125. What tempted or got into your spirit that you thought you could go out there and you did it? You could win a historic national event on a true vintage bike. Where'd that come from?
Well, it's pretty simple for me. If you go back to the 70s when this was happening real time, nobody showed up in 1978 on a 1974 CR 125. They just didn't. Because technology had moved on. Okay,
nothing is older than last year's race bike. That's for sure.
That's right. That's not any different than today's world when it comes to the motorcycles. But in vintage racing, 99% of why a person wins, which might still be true in motocross too, is how well can you ride the given bike that you have, okay? And Clunker and I are at one with each other. I have a 77 CR 125, but I'm more comfortable on the 74, but for the very reason that that's pretty much all I ride and train on. So I can actually make it go around the track faster than I could a newer bike. Now, maybe if I took the time to get acclimated to a newer bike, I would do well. But at the end of the day, for 2024, Ryder pursued the sportsman class, which is for the 74s, and I raced in it as well. But I put my heart into the 77 or the historic class, and he also raced a second class called Grand Prix, and Grand Prix is for 79.
Right.
Ryder took the 77 CR125, and he won the national championship in the Grand Prix class. So he moved, I guess relatively, he moved up the exact same position I did. He took a 77 into the next generation up, and I took a 74 into the next generation up, and we won our national championships in those classes this year. And this is a great time for me to segue into what happened in 2024 in the what we call the premier class for us, the Sportsman 125 class, was a gentleman that rides for NorCal. You may know the NorCal people up in Northern California, Yamahas. Those guys build some seriously good motorcycles. But
Brad and Eric Harvey, good guys. I see them at a lot of events out here. In fact, they're thinking about getting on board with a sponsorship just after the first of the year. But yeah, the Harvey guys, great guys. Go on.
So they built a very nice YZ125 for one of the best vintage motocross riders on the planet, in my opinion. His name is Jamie Adams. Jamie is Texan via Alabamian. I'm not sure which one he claims the most, but he's that boy, and he rides very well. It was a brutal war this year. Ryder and him traded paint all year long. I jumped in there and beat them both every now and then. If they didn't have a perfect ride, I was Mr. Consistent to take over that win when they didn't. And when we got down to the final round in Henrietta, Oklahoma this week, it was whoever won Henrietta would be the national champion. It was it was a three-way, we'll call it a three-way tie, but it was the point spread was just close enough that I was still in it. I was a long shot, but I was still in it. But Ryder was the points leader coming in, and Jamie was a very close second. And when the dust settled, Jamie outperformed us both. God bless him. He rode like a champ, and he ended up in the Sportsman 125 National Championship. Ryder and I shared that championship last year, and I owned it the year before. So now that particular class is owned by Jamie Adams. In the historic class, I took it over this year, and Ryder took over the Grand Prix class. So we still are, all of us earned number one plate, so everybody's happy. Everybody got a trophy, as they say. So we're satisfied. But yeah, so kudos to NorCal Yamaha and their top tier racer, Jamie Adams. He's just fantastic in every way. And so that's kind of the lay of the land of the three.
Hey, Jerry. Can you hear me okay?
Hey,
can you hear me okay?
I have, during that, have earned 2 AMA national championships.
All right, hang on a second, Jerry. Give me a second here, Jerry. I got to thank the people at Vinco. Vinco.com has over 1,000 products in their catalog, and if you're watching this show and you're a vintage racer, you want to get over there to Vinco. They make a lot of different things that you can't find anyplace else, including some offset triple clamps. They're also big OSA enthusiasts. Get over to Vinco.com. Thank you, Curtis Liverton and Vinco.com. Jerry, what I want to talk to you about now is, and then we're going to go to a hard break, a commercial break, and we'll be back to talk about some other things. But right now, what I want to know is, how many events did you travel to this year? What's the furthest you traveled? How many days did you spend on the road, you and Ryder together?
Joe, I lost you there just for a second. I believe your question was, how many events did I travel to during this season?
This season with you and Ryder. How many events did you hit? How many miles do you think you traveled?
The mileage is a little unpredictable. It's a lot. I can tell you that we raced in Georgia on one particular weekend, and then we were off to California. Then we were to Denver, Colorado. and then we were back to New York, and then we were back to Texas. So by the time it was all done, I am certain we have accrued 30,000 miles. And we did as many AHRMA races and AMA races and others that was allowed. And I'm going to say we were on the track at least 20 times this year. And that's a lot for a vintage motorcycle racer.
Well, I 20 know times. You just got back from a race on Tuesday.
That is correct. And I'm going to race Sunday. and I'll race a local event Sunday. So but yeah, so I can tell you this. I bought my Sprinter van with 30,000 miles on it. It turned over to 80,000 miles, and I bought the van earlier this year. So I have put 50,000 miles on a van in less than a year and a half. And that doesn't include the first year when we were traveling a little differently.
I want to thank Gordon McCaffrey, Robert Flaskog, John Anderson. I know Don Kadowski, Al Newman, Tim Terrell, Joe Mayo. A lot of guys are watching. You got a lot of fans out there, Jerry, and I could see some of their comments here. I usually don't do this when I'm doing my live show because, this is a live show, but I usually don't do it during my regular show on Wednesdays because it's a little too distracting. But just having a conversation with you, it's not so distracting, and you're a great guest too. So it makes things a whole lot easier just to be able to thank people that are watching the show. Right now, Jerry, we're about into 32, 33 minutes of the show. I've got to take a break. We're going to run a commercial, and then we'll be back to talk more about your show business career and how you and Clunker are actually in an upcoming movie. We'll be right back.
I'm Gary Semix, and you're watching Vintage Motocross Q&A with Joe Abadi.
Motocross struck America, coming from Europe like a lightning bolt, striking the hearts and minds of people all across the country and the world. Battles of intense racing and cutting rivalries with loyalty to brands and heroes intensified as years of blood, sweat, and dirt flew through the minds of those memories of champions as they wrestled their machines through almost impossible tracks. But where are those past champions? And where are their bikes? Terry Good, an ex-pro motocross racer, has made it his life mission to honor these heroes and the bikes they rode to stardom. We raced, we rode, we lived and breathed motocross. Go back in time and relive those moments, now preserved for the first time ever in the world's first museum dedicated to the history of motocross. Our new building is in the gate. Help us get a great start and you can be part of history. Go to internationalmotocrossmuseum.org and become a part of our team.
Well, excuse me.
I can't wait for you to see the ending of that.
What do we have going on there, Jerry? It looks like you've broken into the film industry, by the way it looks.
Well, it turns out that, I had an unfair advantage. If anybody's in the Hollywood business, they know that's a tough one to break into. I got cast in a film that my wife is the lead actress in. And I got cast as a renegade rider who probably drinks a lot and causes a lot of trouble and whatnot. And ultimately, on his dirt bike, he's left the bar and he's gone through the city, and which you didn't see, and he heads out and he jumps into the woods. He's doing some trail riding apparently, and He comes across a mirror in the woods, and the mirror catches his eye, and he circles back on it. And as he circles back on it, it's a little scary. It's creepy because it is a horror movie, by the way.
Yeah.
He throws the bike down and this mirror. And as he approaches the mirror and he looks into this mirror, I haven't seen it yet, but apparently a demon or a monster or a witch or something creepy grabs me and pulls me into the mirror and beats the crap out of me. And that's where my scene ends.
Oh,
Okay. Isn't that special? So
it is. So
But,
you know what it is? When will that movie be released? And I guess the thing is, when you tell me about it, I'll definitely announce it on the show, and I'm sure you'll have it on Facebook as well. But when is that movie supposed to be released?
Well, the date right now is 2025. I know they just wrapped on the filming, and for you non-actor types, that's a fancy word that means they finished the actual filming, and now they go into what's called post-production, and they'll put it all together, and sooner or later it'll become a real film, and it'll go to distribution for the theaters and the streaming channels and whatnot. And it'll be at that time I'll be calling you. And Joe, as you might know, it's a slow process in Hollywood to make a movie. It doesn't happen in 10 days or 30 days or even 60 days. It might be summer of 2025. It might even be fall of 2025 as we approach Halloween before we actually get to watch the full-length film.
Jerry, I had some friends that were in the business deeply going back into the 80s. A few of them were in the movie The Cotton Club by Francis Ford Coppola. Richard Gere was in it. Nicolas Cage, when he was really not much of a star at all. And I was on the set one day and they said, put on a tuxedo. We need some extras to sit in the Cotton Club. I put on a tuxedo when I sat down. They said, can you come back tomorrow? I said, yeah, I can come back tomorrow. I went back the next day. I was there for 3 weeks. 3 weeks. And I had to be on the set like 6:30 in the morning in a tuxedo by 7, sitting at a table from 7 in the morning till 5 in the afternoon in a tuxedo.
Yeah. So you know what we call that, what my wife Tammy would call that, because obviously you were an extra in a film, but you was I forgot what the word is, but you're a special extra where you just weren't lost in the crowd. You were this figure, right?
That's true. That's true. And in fact, you can see me in a couple of scenes. And, had they put me in the back somewhere, I could have been out of there in one day. But anyway.
So we call that jury duty. In Hollywood, we call that jury duty. That's the equivalent of jury duty is
hey, Jerry,
you got all the
You're really you're involved with this AHRMA thing now. A lot of people know you. You're kind of high profile between the racing, your Sprinter van. You've got Ryder there with you. You made a lot of friends. You got sponsors along the way. You've really, you've taken it up to a level that many of us wish we could do, to where we had that special truck, the dedicated time, certainly the extra money that it takes to do that. And AHRMA has recognized you and your son for finishing so closely together in that class. From what I understand, AHRMA is, and some people are looking at you to get involved in a coordinator level with AHRMA. Do you think there's, how can I say it? I guess you just say it like this. Are politics in your future with AHRMA?
No. And I'll tell you why. It's got nothing to do with AHRMA whatsoever. I like to consider myself really good friends with some of the deepest people in AHRMA. And some of us have a difference of opinion on how maybe some administration should be run and not. But I leave the politicking to those that are in it. My goal, as I tell people, I smile when I ride the Elsinore. That's what I do. If I'm riding the bike, I'm happy. And that's my takeaway and my break from my real world and everything that I have to go through in my life. That gate drops. I don't have to win, Joe. I don't even have to place. If that bike's running good and I'm pulling off the corners and hearing that little two-stroke sing up, it's just wonderful for me. That is the reason why I probably would never partake into the political side of any race organization. But I will certainly be a consultant and or offer opinions, which everybody has one of those, obviously. But but I try try to stay in my lane with politics in terms of AHRMA and other organizations.
Sure.
And by staying in my lane, I mean, I respect those that were elected to those positions, and that's what they do.
Right.
I don't always agree with their decisions, but when it comes to racing, not just so much vintage, but racing, but we'll talk about vintage. To me, the whole organization starts at the race promoter and should work itself out. That means the guy that's putting on the race, if he can do his due diligence and put on a good race where we all have a good time and we all get scored and it's all a nice day and we have a good time, that's all I really ask for. That's where it ends for me. You know, the gate drops, the checker flag comes out, everything that happens in between is really on me. It's not got anything to do with whether an AHRMA official feels like has an opinion of what the financials look like for last month. I could care less about that, you know. And I'm of the opinion that the less political I become in my racing, the happier I will be. So I'm going to try and maintain that. I want to say something that's a little segue from that you were almost leading into about our people that are making such great comments and the fine thing and building the fan base.
Yeah.
That really wasn't by design. It wasn't premeditated. It kind of happened. And I just want to take a moment to thank those people that have just grown to actually like me out on the track and out through the race world. You know, it's not like I had an agenda. You know, you certainly don't gain anything by, you know, gaining friends and all that. But despite my outgoing attitude, I'm very humble at the track. I mean, I try my best to show respect to every racer on the track, everybody that's involved. And there are times when I've just had my butt handed to me and I don't come in and cry like a baby, like some people do, you know?
Yeah.
I don't find excuses, you know? But, you know, so with that said, I've garnered a little bit of a fan base from that. But the whole fan base came in the earliest days of when we were trying to get Clunker going. And I learned something, Joe, that I didn't know would actually work. You know, everybody likes to help a little puppy cross the street. Nobody really cares if me and you get hit by a car, but they will stop everything in their life to save that puppy. Right? Yeah. Clunker's my puppy. Clunker's my puppy. I just said, I don't need your money. I don't need anything. I'm fine. But Clunker needs a set of tires. Bam. Yeah. There's tires. Clunker needs a top end. There's a top end. Clunker's not doing so well. He's not feeling good. It's amazing how people will come to help. And I built this story, and it was kind of a true story. I wanted to take the Elsinore, and I know so many people have done this way before me, but I wanted to take that glorious 1974 CR 125 and bring it back to its national caliber, world-class bike that it was in 1974. And not that I would be the first person to ever win an AHRMA race on a CR 125. You'd have to stand in line for that. But I really wanted to take this old bike that Joe probably had been laying in a basement and parted out and pieces, and had I not come along, may have never raced another race in its life. So in a way, I kind of saved that little puppy out of the freeway, analogy-wise, and put it back together and took it out and rode the bike. And so, you know, that's kind of what garnered getting the sponsorships. But the technique for getting sponsorships is what's so amazing for me is I am of the firm believer that the sponsors, if I would do for the sponsors first, if I would give them what they need first, then maybe they will accept me as a rider for them. And so I'm totally convinced that has been my approach from day one, is just go act like you're sponsored by them. Go ahead and do what you need to do for them. Go ahead and develop an ad or a commercial or a sticker or say something nice at my own expense. Put that together, and those that really want to join us will. And so you can see that I've amassed those people, and you know, it's been really good. One sponsor that I see in the top right corner that we have not given any love to is VMX. Dan Gray of VMX is my parts guy. When I need top ends, when I need clutch plates, when I need brake shoes, when I need those types of hard parts, he's my guy. I need him. You know, he's my guy. Now, does he give me everything for free? Heck no. And I don't ask him to give me everything for free. He does give me great parts, and I'm sure fair market value. And equally importantly, he will show up at races with the parts with him.
Yeah. And you know what I like about VMXQ. Their website is so easy to use. It's so easy to buy parts from him. It makes it a dream. A lot of websites you have to go around. You can't find stuff. It's a real pain in the neck. Dan Gray's page is absolutely fantastic, and his prices are reasonable as well. So I can't really complain about that. I do have to thank my dear friend, and when I say dear friend, he truly is, Chris Carter and Motion Pro. They've been with us for about 4 years now, and they've got a lot of great stuff there, and the stuff that you need as far as tools. Don't just go there looking for parts, but when you go there and you find tools, you can find exactly what you're looking for at Motion Pro. Be sure to visit them online at motionpro.com. Jerry, tell me this. What kind of training regimen do you have? I mean, you look like you're in pretty good shape. You win a lot of races. You're racing against your son, who's, 30 years younger than you or whatever. What do you do as far as training? What do you do as far as training?
Just moments before I started the vintage motocross race, I was what some would call an ultra runner. And the definition of an ultra runner is that idiot that will run long mileage. Now, I'm not a Boston Marathon kind of guy. For my motorcycle people, you'll appreciate this the most. I race hare scrambles on my feet, Joe. Yeah, hare scrambles on my feet. And the length of my hare scrambles is usually 30 kilometers or about 18 and a half, 19 miles. I'm usually out there for 2.5 hours, 3 hours. And I train so I'm training for that. And the benefactor of that is it makes you really good on a motocross bike. I don't get tired. And my son tells me, he says, thank goodness these are only 4-lap motos, because if they were 10-lap motos, I might win more often. And so that's what I do for that. And I'm training for one now. I'm training for a big event that's coming up in middle of January. And I know that sounds like a long way from now, but when you're running, it's not. You got to really start early and get your conditioning right to be able to do that distance. But it's off-road running on your feet. So that's my big thing. And of course, with the motorcycle, you can call this training, but one of the things that I found that a lot of vintage motocrossers don't do, in fact, I was told this was cheating, Joe.
What?
Did you know that practicing on a vintage bike is against the rules?
Where?
That's what my competition tells me. I did not realize that until one day when one of my good friends says, no, you can't be doing that. That's not how it works. And he says, I'm sure it's in the rule book somewhere. It says you can only ride at the day of the event. Well, I actually take clunker out and turn laps. So that's a big deal for me.
Jerry, I believe what they mean there is, and I have heard this, you are correct. You cannot practice on the track that you're going to be racing at that week.
Well, this particular case, just so you know, was full of sarcasm. They were just trying to get me to not practice,
Oh, but I have heard that.
Well, and I don't disagree with that. I like it when a track is exclusively run only on the day of the race, and you can't go in there a week early and get some, advantage on it or whatever like that. But I do practice on the bike a lot, and people talk about, well, you're putting so many hours on that bike. Well, that takes me back to Butch and I, and I'd like to take just a minute and tell you about how our relationship works and how it has worked for the better for even my competition, which is a little ironic. Butch would tell you that he is the hard mechanic. He's the one that makes that motor rotate. So, Joe, let's say we got a third gear, it's got a tooth knocked off of it, or shifting forks broke, or your cylinder's out of clearance, or your crankshaft lowering bearing is gone. That's Butch. He does that hard work. Engine and make it rotate. That's the easiest way I put it. He says, Jerry, here's your full rotating engine. Clearances are good. Crank bearings are good. Bearings, transmission, everything's good. Then I will go tune the bike. I'm the guy that puts the carburetor on it, does the proper jetting, sets the modified ignition timings, checking the compression, changing out heads, pipes, ignitions, timing, all that go with it to fine tune that engine and make that engine the fastest it can possibly be and the most reliable it can be. And so when Butch and I build an engine, it's a two-step process. He does the rotational part, I do the tuning part. And then, of course, I'm the test rider for it. And so after that, after our first year, we won the first national championship. My competition was like, well, you know, what are you doing to build such a nice motorcycle? And you know, people, and I'm sure people coming here tonight will say that Butch builds the greatest engines in the world, and he does. Yeah. But what people are missing, the tuning part and keeping the engine rotating is the secret. You know, it's not just having a good motor that's never been started. It's after it starts and runs for a few hours, does it continue to run? And doing that. So he and I work together real closely on that. And I've schooled him on a lot of tuning stuff. And man, I love hanging out with him when he's got my engine apart, because I just learned how things work. And
hey Jerry,
so,
yes, sir. Did you catch my show last night where I did a little segment on the PVL?
Absolutely. I watched it on the rerun part this morning, and I was super excited because the first thing I did was peel the tape off the rotor. And then that's the first thing I read it off, and then I put it back on after I read the instructions. You know? So yeah, that tells you I watched it. But our competition was coming to us and going, when you have a sponsor, what is your main goal for your sponsor? It's to send them business, right? Well, I find myself in this little bit of a catch-22. Well, now I got to send my competition to my sponsor to build an engine equally as good as mine. And Butch and I have got the total opposite approach of any race team you've ever seen. We go up to our competition and say, let us build you a clunker motor. Let us build it for you. We'll give you the exact same thing I've got. We'll take everything in. And the second we do, that racer, in many occasions, has actually come to my practice track, and I've tiled and tuned the bike for them and then send them back out onto the track just to go to the gate and line up beside me and lots of times outrun me with my own concepts. And so when you look at the Sportsman 125 class in a lot of races around this country, every single Elsinore on that line has a Butch's Jerry Mattox motor in it. And so we're proud of it. We're proud to help. We want to help people come race. It's just not about winning. It's about helping them come in and enjoy the sport, Yeah.
Good leaders, they don't create followers, they create more leaders. And that's what our hobby and our sport desperately needs. Now, Jerry, while we're talking about it, I got to say this. You say that people like, whether it's RMX or Butch Sandgrath or whoever it may be, business comes their way from you being out there and winning on that bike. You have given me a facet to my show that's very, very difficult for me to get. It's hard for me to have boots on the ground at an event. I simply cannot just travel to wherever there's a race, get on a microphone, talk to people, or show footage from that event. You have given me that, and it just brings a whole new facet to my show. So between you doing that, Oscar Gayton doing some videos on some how-to tips, and Roy Vanderveer taking products from our actual vendors like Vinco or Motion Pro and showing us how to use them, it really is taking Vintage Motocross Q&A to the next level. So please, don't stop racing. I need you.
With that said, one of the things about being a good, I'm not sure what the right adjective is, but a good performer for you and others is
you're an ambassador to the sport.
About being sponsored. You don't have to win. You don't have to be a national champion, but you do have to show respect to who you're trying to help, and you have to be at the race, and you have to be very communicable. Some of the best guys out here on the pro class right now in the world are better at promoting than maybe the class winners are. I don't want to throw names out in the AMA pro world, but some of the guys that are finishing 5th or 6th are just better speakers and better ambassadors for the sport. That's what I'm trying to say. They're better ambassadors for the sport. And so that's what we're trying to build, is ambassadors for the sport and ambassadors for the sponsors. And that will bring the attraction to the sport. Now, So with that said, thank you for all you do. There's a gentleman running around out boots on the ground now that has offered to make his content available to us and from time to time. And I just think it's invaluable. And I want to mention Andrew Stager of Vintage Factory TV talked to me yesterday. He's just a total proponent of trying to help all of us help each other. Kudos to him. He has shown some serious good videos. He's been out documenting some of the things that Clunker's done and some of the great footage. If I can keep him around and we can do this again, there'll be a lot of stuff for all of us to benefit from that, including AHRMA and the sanctioning bodies. We're trying to build that to where it's popular, and so, but Joe, listen, I can't thank you enough. As being a sponsor of me, just so the world knows, when you have sponsors, you always think of like, okay, give me something for free. Give me some tires, give me some pistons, give me something. That's the way the mindset is. Give me. Here's my hands, fill them full of your stuff. And I'll put a sticker on your bike. Okay. I'm the opposite. I'm total opposite. I'm like, let me go perform. Let me get the van together. Let me get everything together. And then if you like the package, maybe you'll throw me a bone, and you have in a big way. The show speaks volumes. And I hope
you're out there next year and I can do it again. You're kind of like a magazine, Jerry, and I would like the inside cover or the back cover next year if you hit the trail again. So let me know what that's going to take to get a bigger spot either on that chest protector or whatever it's going to be. I definitely want to be in the game with Clunker. I want to thank Paul Stannard and Preston Petty Products for being a longtime sponsor of the show. The legend continues at PrestonPettyProducts.com. Jerry, what are some of your favorite tracks? What tracks do you think suck?
Listen, I like that question. Ryder and I would both tell you we like real motocross tracks. Yeah. We like dirt. We don't prefer the grass tracks. Now, I'm not opposed to them. But this year was fantastic. Almost every single race I did was on a motocross track that was legendary, by the way. If you recall, I went to Moto Masters in upstate New York. I didn't know that track even existed. Turns out there was a Trans Am there back in the 70s. And I believe it was Jimmy Weiner. Did very well there at the time. And sand tracks, big tracks. We're not real concerned with the jumps. Even if it's a modern track, if they prepare the dirt properly, they can leave the jumps alone because it's really your choice whether you want to send it or not. And, with that said, I think I could segue right now as to why I like those types of tracks better than a current modern track. If you go to a current modern track, if you take your kid and he's racing 125s or 250s, it doesn't really matter. And you've got little Johnny with you. And let me tell you this, nobody wants to go out into the first practice. Nobody at an AMA amateur race, nobody wants to go on the first practice because the track is plowed 3 feet deep and it's got about 4 feet of water sitting on top of that 3 feet. Yeah. It's nasty. It ruins your bike. It ruins the track. The track becomes a rutted up mess. And the real hardcore guys would say, yeah, but that's real motocross. Bull crap. That is not real motocross. It's not even good. And the only reason why you're saying that is because you don't know better. If you've been around the industry like I have, you would know a properly groomed track is this. And here's my point, and I say this with all viciousness I can say. You follow your kid into a rut, or your competition into a rut in a corner in a modern AMA race, and that dude in front of you makes a mistake, you're coming to a dead stop. You're in the same slot he's in. You're in a halt. You can't get out of it if you try. Without serious skills, you can't get out without a try. In my world, Joe, if you make a mistake in front of me, I'll just turn under you or I'll let that bike sweep around you. And it makes it fun. My kid gets on to me all the time. He says, why do you do this? What? He says, you're the first guy on the track. I said, because that's the best that track's going to be all day. Instead of it being the worst it's going to be all day, it's the best it's going to be. And I love going out and practice on that bike on the track. So when you have a prep vintage track, if one local pro got on a very well prepped real motocross track, he would go, why don't we do this all the time? This is the best track ever. Now I realize that there are those hardcore guys that just feel like it's just got to be nasty, and God bless them. Me, I just really, really enjoy the way we groom these good tracks. So what makes our tracks best? Ultimately answer your question, what's the best and what sucks? Muddy Creek was fantastic. Motor Masters was fantastic. All of them were fantastic. Kevin Wyndham's track. Oh my gosh. Kevin Wyndham has a great track in Centerville, Mississippi on his property. And when Kevin preps a track, he doesn't prep it for Jet and Hunter. He preps it for Jerry and Ryder. It's unbelievable how good he knows how to prep a track. And we just came back from Johnsonville, Texas, where a track was prepped. Absolutely beautiful. In fact, they all were prepped.
Where's it, Jerry? Where's this and what's going on here? Who's next to you?
Okay,
who are you ahead of?
Well, you know, it only lasted for about a lap and a half, but that's my buddy from Minnesota who claims to be, or the magazines claim he's the best sand rider in the world. I would say he's a pretty good mud rider too. That's our boy Tommy Benolkin. And Tommy and I met at the AMA National Championship a few months back, and we were sitting on the starting line waiting to go out and practice, and this bull taco pulls up beside me. It's got Benolkin written on the side of it. And I'm looking over at this guy, and I'm thinking, because I don't know Tommy, and I'm thinking, oh, he must have bought one of Tommy's old bikes. So I look over, hey, did you get that from Tommy Benolkin? And he goes, I am Tom Benolkin. Well, I instantly fell in love. You know, I had my boy crush on Tom Benolkin right now. I said, I can't believe, you know, I'm sitting beside Tommy Benolkin right now. And so him and I had a wonderful conversation. Then we went out and practiced and proceeded to bang handlebars and bump and run from each other. And the old bull taco gave up the ghost in practice. And he said he'd see me again someday. And so guess what? That picture you just put up was 2 days ago in Henrietta, Oklahoma at the AHRMA Nationals in Moto 1. That's me and Tommy going after it, fighting for second place. And Ryder had made a mistake and moved off the track. And that little bit of roost that you see coming in from the right frame is coming off of Jamie Adams's NorCal YZ125. And so at that moment in time, Tommy and I were going after it hard. And Tommy finally, in the mud, pushed me out of the way, and I went back after him. And guess what? The old bull taco killed over again, man. I feel so bad for Tommy. And so I called Tommy after the race. I said, Tom, I don't understand this love for the bull taco. I don't recall you riding bull tacos. I don't remember. But when I look at your history, you actually have Elsinore lineage in your life. He goes, oh, yeah, of course I do. If you ever build a good Elsinore, it's game over for the rest of us. And I'm not going to tell you guys, Tom Benolkin can outrun pretty much anybody on a poorly jetted moped. That's just how it is. Don't kid yourself. The dude can ride.
I've seen Tommy clean up in a vintage class on like a 71 or a 72 Penton against Elsinores and bikes that are really tuned to perfection. There's no doubt about it. The guy's an excellent rider. Hey, Jerry, do you know who Jeff Tewison is?
I do not.
Jeff Tewison? He is the best sand rider in the world. Cousin of Harry Everts. He's from Belgium. Look it up. Jeff Tewison. The guy is unbelievable in sand. Now, for all your accolades and trophies and all these championships and everything else, explain this.
Well, that's called eating crap. And what I did was on the first moto of the historic 125 class, where at that point in time, I had an 8-point lead going into it. And all I really needed to do was just have a nice, smooth ride and help secure that national championship. I came off the corner, and the guy in front of me missed a gear, and I slammed right into the back of him, turning me a couple of flips, and I hit the ground and broke the perch off of the front brake of clunker. And I crawled back on the bike, and I took off, and I worked diligently to get myself back to second place, which then left me tied for the national championship with one moto to go. So this whole drama didn't shake itself out until the final moto, to which I got the whole shot and checked out and stayed smooth and calm and didn't do anything dumb. But I'm still sore to this day from that one. That one left a mark. And hey, Joe, I've raced clunker. It's hard to imagine how many times I've raced clunker and practiced on it. Yeah. I've only hit the dirt on that bike less than five times. And the first, I was going to say it's probably 3 or 4 times at the most. And those are just fall over. You know, you go into a rut and you oversteer, you do something dumb and you fall over. I think I fell over in the parking lot one time because my boot got stuck on the seat somehow and I fell over, you know. But outside of that, I've never really crashed it. Boy, did I make up for that. That bike cut flips, and people that watched it and saw it, they did not think I was going to get up. They thought I was gone.
2 weeks ago, I wrecked on a Segway in Chicago. On a Segway.
Boy. I know what a Segway is. That had to hurt. And you probably went straight over the front.
I'll tell you why, because it got those big wheels on the side. And when you lose your balance, you can't put your foot out.
That is correct.
Jerry, I have to take a break. We're going to run a commercial, and we'll be back with more from Jerry Mattox.
I'm Don Kudowski, and you're watching Vintage Motocross Q&A. Don't go anywhere.
Vinco, who already has a full line of vintage parts, now has air shocks that are an exact duplicate of the original air shocks so popular in the late 70s. So whether you're looking to build a full racer or museum showpiece, these shocks will give you that incredible 70s look and improve your bike's performance. These new air shocks are fully rebuildable with Vinco rebuild kits, and all shocks are hand assembled in the USA with all new components. Every component is brand new. Just like the originals, our air shocks are adjustable with 2 chambers, high and low pressure, giving you tremendous flexibility for settings of your bike suspension. The Vinco air shocks come fully assembled and ready for installation. Just add air or nitrogen. The kits include the manual and spacers. Visit Vinco.com to check out the air shocks and all that Vinco has to offer to help you get back on track and to keep that ride going.
Vinco has a special for the month of November, 20% off across the board on everything at Vinco. If you spend over $200, you get free shipping. That's free shipping at Vinco.com. It appears that we have someone else on the show with us. Jerry, who do we have here?
Yeah, I thought I'd bring in a special guest. He showed up finally. This is my son, Ryder Mattox, who is the 2022 Co-National Sportsman 125 champion and the 2024 AMA 125 Expert National Champion and the 2024 AHRMA Grand Prix National Champion, all aboard CR 125s. Ryder Mattox. Joe, have your way with him. Ask him some questions.
How about that? I would have my way with him, Jerry, but you know what? I'm like W.C. Fields. I don't work with kids.
That's awesome.
Ryder.
No worries.
How much fun is it to be out there with the old man racing old bikes?
Man, I tell you, I'm having a lot more fun racing vintage bikes than I think I ever did racing modern bikes.
Yeah.
Do you
work on them too? I mean, has it helped you mechanically in that sense?
Well, I can tell you one thing. Working on a vintage bike is about 10 million times easier than working on a modern bike. You can tap the head off in about 5 minutes than taking 2 hours.
Okay. So, Joe, I asked him, you know, in our earlier days of racing vintage together, I asked him really from his point of view as a teenager, how cool is it to have your dad on the track? Or is it kind of like me showing up at the party, trying to be that dad that's your friend, you know, and ruining the party of all these friends? You know, am I more of an annoyance or and I'll let him answer. You know, Ryder, what's it like when you come off of a corner or you come off the first turn and you don't get the whole shot and you look up and all you see is that number 1 on my back and you're going, crap, it's my dad again. How does that feel?
What is that like chasing your dad around with that number one on his back?
Yeah.
I think it's hilarious and it's an absolute blast to race with him. I mean, it's always fair and it's always a great race every time I race with him. It's amazing.
But would you say I ride clean with you?
Okay, sometimes. There's sometimes when you'll just push me straight off the track if you catch me lacking.
Do you guys practice together?
Oh, absolutely.
Yes.
That's a fact. And I learn more than I teach these days, Joe.
Well, that's good.
I do.
That's good.
Well, we're going to excuse Ryder from the program, and thank you for showing up, son. I appreciate it. And but I'll take it from here. But just know, guys, everybody out in the free speaking world, you can't even imagine what it's like to race with your son. I mean, you know, we all out there with our sons wanting them to be motocross riders, and we're usually from being that dad who's the driver and the mechanic and all that, to be able to go out and line up with him. And this is not the first time we lined up. We started racing each other in modern bikes when he became of age to ride a 125. I was riding one of the vet classes on a 250, and on this one particular day, they put my vet class and this 125A class on the gates at the same time without a stagger start for the first time. And I thought, oh boy, I finally get to race my son. I'm going to wear him out, show him who's boss. The dude lapped me. It was ridiculous. And yeah, changing of the guard. But with that said, Ed Henrietta on the starting line, Albert Newman was interviewing Ryder, and he was interviewing Jamie Adams because, quite honestly and statistically, they were the two candidates to win this championship.
Okay.
And when he came over to me, he took one look at me and he stopped. He thought, you know, maybe I should ask Jerry a question because, you know, after all, he does have the #1 plate. He is, you know, co-reigning champion. He sticks the microphone in my face. He says, well, Jerry, do you have any team tactics? Are you going to gang up on Jamie? Are you going to do anything? I said, hell no, there's no team tactics. I said, I'm that living proof of that dad that will eat his young to remain king. And so I think poor Jamie actually witnessed that on the track. He saw me go by Ryder and push him out of the way when he was sliding around and spinning out. I said, this is every man for himself. And so, yeah, when me and Ryder are on the track, it's every man for itself because it's like but listen, Ryder's parked me in the cheap seats just as many times as I have him. That's for sure.
Okay. I try to keep clean with you. Though.
You do. I know. You spare me on a lot of times. You do.
Well, Ryder, I want to thank you for popping in with us here and sharing some stories. And, you know, as the seasons go on, hopefully you guys race together again next year. We'll have you both back on the show. I do have some further questions for Jerry, and I'm going to get on with that. I'm going to get on with that right now. Ryder, thanks for coming in with us for a minute.
Okay.
Jerry.
Back to the show, Joe.
Tell me this. What do you think is going to help make vintage grow? I mean, you mentioned, let me give you my opinion on it, and then you could tell me what you think. Hang on one second.
Sure.
I've always said, not always, but in the last 5 or 6 years, I have said the best way to get this sport to grow is to get recently retired professionals like Kevin Windham, like Ryan Villapoto, who actually does it, and a couple of others. There's another kid out there. His name escapes me right now. He was at Diamond Don's. He likes the YZ100s. I can't think of his name. Anyway, getting those guys in will, I think, you know, pull that age group in, that 30 to 35-year-old crowd. What do you think, Jerry? How can we get, I mean, the kids are one thing, but, you know, they're all dreaming of becoming the next Ryan Dungey and you know, and kids like that. Well, what do you think is going to get that next wave to come into the sport?
So to answer or to maybe help you with the one question you were thinking to yourself was maybe that person you was referring to at Diamond Don's was Blake Wharton.
That's it, Blake Wharton. That's it.
Blake was an incredibly good pro rider, and he's probably even better vintage rider. Haven't seen Blake in a while, but he did a lot of great. He was responsible for articles in Racer X magazine, I believe, and they covered myself in Racer X and a few things, and so that is actually leading to my point. There was an article in Racer X just a few months ago about that very topic on bringing attention to vintage motocross, and though they never mentioned me in that article, they did in the first article. They had a picture of me. Just a picture of my persona and me in my race clothes, but they never mentioned me. But so I must have got on their radar somewhere as someone who is trying to bring attention and build the sport to what its maximum capacity could be. So I think a lot of exposure to the sport. Now that's what will bring attention to it.
Okay.
It's unfortunate, Joe, that guys like me are aging out. And there's people out here racing that are a way good bit older than I am. We need to bring the kids in.
Yep.
And I tell you where our marketplace is. Our marketplace is at any amateur motocross race across America. There are thousands of kids, thousands of them out here riding, and and I know it's their dream to go pro, and some will. Some are that good. But let's face it, 95% of anybody trying a motorcycle today is never going to see an outdoor motocross or a supercross. It's not going to happen, okay? So
95%, you're being generous at 95.
I think I am.
It's like 2% that make it. Maybe.
I think I am. And so with that said, and we're no exceptions, just so you know, we're no exceptions to that. So I think when your kid hits 17, 18 years old and he's at that point where he's literally taking his life in his own hands at this point, maybe they should give vintage a shot. And I think vintage could be sold to them with this premise. I think it could be sold to them as it's safer, because it is. Now, people say it's safer. Why? Well, the speeds are slower, but even more importantly, you couldn't jump that 200-foot triple if you wanted to. You don't have enough power to make it. You won't even try it, and it puts you back in a realm where you can still ride as viciously hard as you want and do that and not get killed. So I think there's a big proponent in that vintage motocross offers a certain amount of safety. Can you get hurt in vintage? Oh, yeah. We've seen people get hurt all year long. I got banged up the other day, but it wasn't because I tried a 100-foot triple on an Elsinore. It wasn't that, And so, but the next part that I wanted to say is that we're shifting through time, Joe. My vintage days was, and the reason why I ride clunker was because I wanted to go back to when I was a kid, not when I was a pro. I wanted to go back when it was fun. It wasn't work. It was just running up and down the cul-de-sacs and the woods and the neighborhoods and, and crossing over to the next neighborhood, meeting your buddies and riding on some little makeshift motocross track, dreaming to be Marty Smith. That was the funnest times in the world for me.
Yeah.
And so that for me was the 70s. Now you take somebody that's 10 years older than me, the 60s was their time. The 60s are almost gone. The day of those big BSAs and those Triumphs and those Harleys and stuff, they're kind of getting pushed out the back. Well, the next thing to get pushed out of the back is my era, the Elsinore, what I call the Elsinore era. Not that was the only bike. There was great bikes in that era, but it's getting pushed. When you take somebody that's 30 years old, what would be vintage to them? Probably a 90s model bike would be their idea of vintage. Yeah. Because even a 30-year-old can't appreciate and understand what a little clunker Elsinore looks like. And so as we keep shifting in time, our vintage classes are going to be moving up in years. So right now, I think there's a big marketplace in the 80s and the early 90s.
I agree.
I think the 80s are good.
You know what?
Good.
I'm going to say this to interrupt you just for a second, Jerry, because it's about the betterment and the preservation of the sport. Way back in the early 2000s, a gentleman named Tom France, who started a splinter vintage group called American Classic Racing, saw this happening. And he created a class called Vintage 80s. And within 2 years, it was the biggest class that there was at a vintage race. And then when that was kind of full and gates were lining up and they were able to make experts and amateurs and it was full, he went to a vintage 90s. But here's what he did with the vintage 90s stuff. You have to race a vintage bike in order to race vintage 90s or a modern bike at those events.
Okay, nice. So
if anybody is out there and they're a coordinator or a promoter in some sense, that is something to think about. The 80s have been there now, and there are some splinter groups out there who have the 90s as well. But if you want to make even another class, get those early 2000 bikes out there, but make it so they got to run some type of vintage class as well. And maybe that other vintage class is now vintage 80s. So they got to race a modern bike or more of a modern bike, but they got to get into that 80s thing as well. And honestly, Jerry, there's a big difference performance-wise and in the suspension, but all in all, an 83, 84, 85 Honda CR250, it's a single shock, 250cc water-cooled bike with 2 radiators. It's not like light years behind something from the 90s. It really is.
No, in terms of just setting on the bike and taking off on it, it's not light years different from a current bike today, other than it's a two-stroke. You know, you go back to the 80s, you could take any modern kid that's riding Schoolboy 1 in AMA right now, which is a 125 class, by the way. I mean, he could go back into the late 80s, mid 80s, late 80s, but certainly the 90s, and not be too horribly uncomfortable for a few minutes. But once they get acclimated, you know, they can ride anything. And so I'm thinking the way the sands are shifting, that next year, and to your point of your guy, you might find me on two choices. You might find me on a 1980 or 79 CR250, or you might find me on a 1985, 86 CR250, because that was right in the depth of my pro career, was that bike. So I know those bikes well. But I'm going to keep bringing Clunker out every time. Clunker doesn't get put to bed and I get replaced with that, because that is what we have to do to protect those earlier classes for as long as we can. And, you know, and honestly, most of the dads that I'm recruiting, I go to an AMA race and I see a dad with a kid that I think would have a lot of fun in vintage. And I will go to him and I'll try and sell it to him. But he's too young. The dad, he's too young to understand the old clunker bike. Yeah. But he's not too young to understand what a 1995 RM250 looked like.
Exactly.
Daddy, you can get in his attention, you know?
And that bike is 30 years old, Jerry. That bike is 30 years old.
I know. I feel it. Trust me, every day I feel it. And so, you know, so I think that's kind of the direction that we need to go. Obviously, I am going to be a huge proponent on keeping the Elsinore heritage alive, and of any of those classes. I would like to see the Grand Prix classes built bigger, the historic classes built bigger. We've done a good job building the sportsman class bigger. At the AMA Nationals, we had 26 riders in one class the first year. And but back to the youth, what I was going to say about that, in the AMA Nationals, we actually had a 125 youth class, and the only I can't remember what the age cutoff was, but I believe it was 15. You could be 15 years or younger and race it. And you know what? They had 10 or 12 riders in that class. That made me happy. Nothing made me happier than to see a young child on a CR125 smiling the same as I did when I was 13 or 14 years old.
Exactly.
You know? And having a great time with it. So I don't want to give up on that. I really don't. And
we should.
Hey, you know.
And we shouldn't, Jerry. Jerry, I gotta give a plug to replicamotorcycleparts.com. I know you're a big Elsinore enthusiast, and you can get yourself a clamp just like this for $65 that holds on the silencer to your 73, 74 Elsinore 125 and 250. An air filter cage for your 76 through 78, just $175. And if you ride a Kawasaki, you can get yourself a gas cap like this made of billet, just $71.50. All available from Paul Parkinson and replicamotorcycleparts.com, and they will make parts if you want them. Trick one-off stuff that you want to have replicated. You send him the part, and he will let you know if he can make it. This guy is doing more for vintage motocross right now. I mean, not that a lot of people are not, including Motion Pro and Full Circle and so many, but there's nobody replicating parts, especially the really, really difficult stuff like Paul Parkinson Sr. Jerry, what do you do in the real world when you're not racing and having a great time with your kid? You have a job, or what's going on?
I do have a job. Before I jump into that real quick, I want to thank Paul Parkinson too. You know, Clunker is loaded with Paul Parkinson motorcycle replica parts. Yeah. It's loaded with those parts, and Paul is fantastic. And while you were saying that, you slipped in Tom McAllister's name. Our Full Circle wheels have been bulletproof all year long. I cannot say enough for you know, having a co-guy of Full Circle wheels, Tom McAllister. Just another great person in this sport that we need to show respect for. The day job, I'm what they used to call just a good old-fashioned computer programmer. You know, I started a software firm back when it was not cool to do that, and in like maybe 1982 or 3, I started programming computers, and have been ever since, and do large corporate giant type clients. And so without giving you a big, deep explanation of that, I own a software firm and I'm still the head programmer there. And I have Ryder in college in computer science right now, hoping to employ him someday. So Ryder's pursuing a degree.
Do you have just Ryder, or do you have other children as well?
Just Ryder. And back to that very beginning story when I was mentioning his mother was an accomplished motorcycle racer too. She becomes pregnant and we just took her, well, what are we going to name this kid? Ryder Mattox. That's how it came out. So, it was doing that. So yeah, that's the story, the short story on what I do.
Jerry, were you in any other movies other than this upcoming one?
I have been cameos in some of Tammy's personal films. She's also a writer and a filmmaker. And like you, I get cast as an extra a lot and just go stand in the corner and don't say anything and look like somebody that might start some trouble. I'm easy. That's easy for me. So, but
that happened. That happened once. That happened once. It's not happening again.
That's
not happening again.
So let me interrupt you on that Hollywood thing one last time. When I got booked, I didn't get booked. Clunker got booked in a second film this year. And from a true, legit filmmaker in Los Angeles was looking for a vintage bike to perform in a scene. And they wanted, it was an off-road camping scene. And I'll go real fast, I promise. I take the bike on set. They're gonna pay me way too much money to haul this bike on set, and the set just happened to be in Western North Carolina, even though the casting was in Los Angeles. The reason why they were casting out back east was because that's where the film was going to be made. So I get the job. I send them pictures of Clunker, and they're super stoked about it, and they're like, "That's the bike we want." And so we go to the set, and the good news is I took my secondary bike for my personal little drive around bike, which is a 1982 Honda XL 185. So I took it with me. So I unload the Clunker out of the van and I go to the director and, or the assistant director. And I said, "Who's your actor?" Young man walks up and he's the actor. "You ever ridden a motorcycle before?" "No." I said, "You got cast in this film to ride this bike and you've never ridden before." "Well, it's been a long time. When I was a kid, I had a mini bike." Okay. And they wanted him to ride Clunker in a serious off-road scene with a girl on the back, with some person, this other human on the back. So I said, "Look, I don't know how well insured you are, but you're going to kill your actor. Clunker's not going to put up with that. Clunker, it won't work." And I said, "But I tell you what I'll do." Right. So I'm looking at the guy. He's about my size. I said, "Give me your clothes. Give me your helmet. We'll pull the XL 185 out of the truck and we'll use it and we'll do the scene." And the director said, "Heck yeah." And I got paid like $1 gazillion. I'm exaggerating, of course, but I got paid Hollywood money, okay, for a 3-day on set. And all I had to do was ride this XL 185 around through the woods and stuff. Yeah. And the poor actor, he didn't care. I was just his stunt double. He still got to be the speaking lines and do his little pretty boy stuff. And because I had a helmet on, a full face helmet on, so you couldn't tell. But he was
the lead in the show. The guy was the lead in the movie.
Well, this particular character, and it wasn't really a movie; it was a film, and it was a film that that I don't want to go into too much of the detail on it, but it was a film that was for streaming TV of some sort. Now, I think it was only going to be like a 30-minute film. I don't know if we call that a film short. Would be probably what you call that. And so the guy just couldn't ride the bike, and he didn't want to ride it, and so I got that job by proxy of just being at the right place at the right time. And it was a paying gig. And so now I've been in 2 movies, I've been in 2. Clunker's been in 1. So there you go. It's dumb
Jerry,
stuff.
I'm about, I'm just about out of questions, and we've been at this for almost an hour and a half. But if there are some topics or anything that you want to talk about, sponsors you want to mention, or anything that may have come to mind over the past hour and a half that you say, "Gee, I wish I would have said something about that," now would be a good time.
Well, listen, I will help you close this show out. by showing a little appreciation to obviously all my sponsors.
Right.
You know who you are. I don't need to call you out, and do this, but Joe, if you'll throw the graphic back up for me, I'll just say, if you're on this graphic for me now, just expand the window. No, just expand the window on me.
Oh, from the one behind you?
Yeah, just that. Just expand it where I'm the only one on the screen for just a sec. Okay, if you're on this screen, bless you. Thank you. There's others that aren't on the screen. You know who you are. You know how I feel about you. But if you're on this screen, you have played a huge role in my abilities to show up to these races, And, Joe, you're in the top left corner. I've got Andrew Steger down in the bottom right corner. I got Steve Litz, who is one of my best friends and best suspension guys you'll ever get. I've got Rhett Smith over at Oleans, who is making sure I've got the best shocks. MXG Designs is doing all of our number plate backgrounds and graphics and stickers and all the stickers that I have made, Joe. Yep. I have your logos and your stickers pre-made to go on the bike. We're done by MXG Designs. JJ Rails is my practice track. ReMX, we know Dan Gray, Russell Waters at AMSOIL, Paul Parkinson at Motorcycle Replicated Parts. And last but certainly not least, Ryder and I are not the only father-son team that race motorcycles. It's not that odd in vintage motorcycle racing. And Tim Boardfield and Reed Boardfield make the 125, the same 125 class, the Sportsman 125 class, they make it a weird anomaly because they're father and son team, and me and Ryder are father-son team. Reed and Ryder are the same age. Me and Timmy are the same age, and we race the same class. So when you go to any AHRMA Sportsman 125 expert class, you've got two sets of father and sons competing viciously with one another. And then after it's over with, we go to dinner and I pay one night, Tim pays the next night. We stay in the same hotels. We book our trips together. We do everything together. And it's just unbelievable how family friendly vintage is. And Joe, you can come back to me now. I'm done with the sponsors. I just wanted to let you know that the sport itself is laden with family. And it's not just father-sons. We got father-daughters. We got sisters. We got brothers racing. We've got cousins out there. And it goes on and on. And so Ryder came to me one day and he says, "Hey, Dad, I know the Boardfields race, but is there any other father-son teams out there?" And I said, "Oh, Ryder, there's plenty. There's plenty." But I said, "There's one in particular you need to be aware of." And I pointed over to the gentleman that many of us will know this name. His name is Henry Greff. And for those of you that don't know Henry Greff, he's been in motocross longer than any of us. He worked with Danny Chandler on his team for a long time. Superior motorcycle rider himself, a CZ guru. And he just happens to be, I think, maybe 81 or 82 years old right now. That's the father. The son, Jay Greff, who is equally a good rider, equally at everything in it, equally quality of a person, is probably 50 now. And I'm telling Ryder, I said, "I know you think we're special and, we're this anomaly in the sport." I said, "You and I would have to race 20 more years apiece just to get to where they are, right? Just to be where they are right now." I said, "We're nobody." Yeah, I know you think you've raced 17 years and that's a big deal. That's because you're 20, and I've raced 50 years and I think it's a big deal because I'm 60. I get it. But we're not even in their league, We're just not, And the other thing I want to point out was to all the real motocrossers out there that think we're just a bunch of old guys riding old bikes and, dust comes off of us as we try and get off our wheelchair and get on our motorcycles. I challenge you and I beg you to show up, because until you've turned a lap with Indiana's Bob Bean, you don't know anything about what you're talking about. You make fun of me. I'm the easy one. You got to get by me before you get to the good ones. Okay. And you haven't even seen the day that you walk up on some of our real talent, So I know where I stand in the school of talent. I realize, I am what I am, and I do the best I can. And I've scored 2 AMA national championships and 3 AHRMA national championships in a 3-year run. And I just hope that at this point in my life that I've made some great friends through this. I know they're my great friends. I hope they think the same of me, because I love and cherish every single one of them out there. And I will close the show with this. I will close the show with this.
Hey, Jerry, I know it's a long way from you, but do you think it's possible you'd make it up to the York swap meet in January 12th on the York Fairgrounds? I've been there I've been there so many times, and I love it so much. I go from California there for the last 3 years. It's a wonderful time for me to hang out there.
There's 3 shows that I've
Jerry, I'm talking, missed. Jerry. Give me a minute. This one, give me a minute. Give me a minute, Jerry.
Play and putting him on display just for entertainment purposes only, and enjoying, because I like a good swap meet. I do. I really like them. And but I hate that I've missed George Eckerman's party for the last 2 years. That is always falling on a big national race. If we did just that schedule, and to the same point, I had to be at Barber's instead of being in Chicago a couple of weeks ago, because I was definitely coming to see Terry Good and all the beautiful motorcycles and stuff out on the lawn. It's just hard to race and do both. But the January 12th, I have nothing scheduled, and we're talking heavy about coming up and doing that. So
that would be awesome.
That would be great.
That would be.
Let me close with this. Let me say this.
Yeah, what's that?
Where else in the world can a guy like me go and come off the finish line of a big race, Diamond Dons, and win it, and be high-fived and complimented by Brad Lackey? Where else can you go do that? Where else can you go to a race and have Gary Simmons walk up on you and go, you're pretty good, but I could make you better,
Yeah.
Where else could you go and hang out with poor old Garrett Wolsink, and he just wants to hear your stories? I mean, Garrett is like talking to a World War II vet. I mean, his stories, where else do you, meet Gary Jones, the inventor of it all? Where do you go? Where you get, it's unreal, isn't it? And so where else do you go when you meet Kevin Windham, you hang out with Kevin Windham, and Kevin was working on trying to get himself back in better shape, and he knew I was a runner, and so he challenges me to a foot race around his hair scramble track. Who gets to do that? Who gets to go whip up on Kevin Windham running around the hair scramble track? Where else am I going to get an opportunity to handle a man like that? And last but not least, to all of you, I'm very Christian based. Where else do you go to get saved but Trampas Parker, 2-time world champion? He baptized me at the final round of the race in 2022. I mean, no other sport has ever offered me such amenities. And for all of you watching tonight, for all of you that has in any way come up and said hello to me, bless you for all you've done. This has been one heck of a ride, and I hope it doesn't end today. I don't think it will.
Jerry Mattox, thank you for being my guest tonight. You made it real easy for me. Your stories are interesting, and I'm sure that you can tell us so much more. But I want to wish you and your family, a smooth road ahead, and keep us posted about when the movie comes out or anything else that you may have been going on or will have going on as far as the movie industry goes or anything with the motorcycles. And again, save a big piece of real estate for me on that chest protector or something, Jerry. I really want to be a big part of your effort and Team Clunker. And you know what? Maybe I could help the kid out too. Okay.
I appreciate that. We appreciate all you do. Thank you, Joe. Thank you for having faith in me. I know you interview the biggest. And have a great and blessed day.
Thank you, sir, so very much. Jerry Mattox, everyone. Well, I want to thank Jerry Mattox for being my guest tonight on Vintage Motocross Q&A. He did have some interesting stories. It's a wonderful thing to hear about his son and him traveling about and racing those old bikes. You just don't You just never really got a chance to experience that back in the old days so much. I know I didn't anyway. So what else can I possibly say other than thank you? And I want to thank all of our sponsors once again who help make the show possible every week. Motion Pro, Vinco, Preston Petty Products, Replica Motorcycle Parts, RacerX.com, International Motocross Museum, and Full Circle Racing. Don't forget, you can become a show supporter just like Al Keith, Carl Word, Alan Huey, Tom Miller, Larry Passman, Jay Stoker, Keith Geisner, Tyler McGregor, Fred Hudgens, and Sean Gomes. For just $49, you get a shirt just like the one I'm wearing right here, a Vintage Motocross Q&A shirt. Also, Russell Waters has jumped on board and will send you some products from AMSOIL as well. Don't forget our regular show every week, Vintage Motocross Q&A. We'll be back next Wednesday. So thank you all for watching tonight, and thank you again to my guest, Jerry Mattox. That's it this week, or just that's it for this week on this special night of Vintage Motocross Q&A. We'll see you next time.